Dave Talks Comics, Episode 70, Justice League Unlimited, Season 2, Episodes 10 through 13. Welcome to Dave Talks Comics, a program on the subjects of comic books and cartoons. I talk about comic books I have read and cartoons I have watched. I talk from my notes. I don't go panel by panel or scene by scene. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. This program is not spoiler-free. I try not to spoil everything, but in the process of talking about these comics and cartoons, I will probably spoil them in some way. I want to begin by saying I kind of goofed when I recorded the last episode that I did on Justice League Unlimited. I probably should have cut it off after episode 8, Hunter's Moon, or Mystery in Space, because episode 9, I'd forgotten that episodes 9, 10, 11, and 12 are basically one story. Kind of like the story that ended the second season of Justice League, Star-Crossed, or the story that the three-parter that ended season 1, Savage Time, I believe it was called. I know they fought the Vandal Savage in that, or even the story that began the Justice League series, which was also a three-parter. Well, this one's a four-parter, but other than that, still, it's basically one story. Even though it isn't called Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, they each have their own separate titles. The previous one was called Question Authority, and it ended on a cliffhanger where Superman and the Huntress had gone to find the Question, who had been captured by Lex Luthor and Project Cadmus, after he had gone to try and kill Lex Luthor, thinking that would solve all their problems. But of course he found out that Luthor was actually much stronger than he thought he was, and so it turned out to be much more difficult. He ended up getting tortured by Cadmus, which you actually show on screen, some of that on screen. And then the Huntress and Superman finally show up at one of Project Cadmus's sites, locate him, I think with the help of the Martian Manhunter. I'm not certain on that. And then they get ready to break him out, and then at the end of episode 9, Question Authority, Captain Atom shows up, and at first they think he's there to help them, and then they realize that he's not. He says, no, you're not leaving with him. He's government property, he being the Question. So in this episode, you begin with a battle between Superman and Captain Atom. And Captain Atom makes the point that he can control radiation, including red sun radiation, which, of course, part of the reason why Superman is super strong is because he's on Earth. Unlike Krypton, Krypton had a red sun, and Earth has a yellow sun. And for some reason, the yellow sun gives him strength. The red sun, if he's ever on a world with a red sun, then it saps him of his strength, which I believe was the case in that classic book in which he fought Muhammad Ali. I believe that was done on a world with a red sun. But I think I read that years and years ago, certainly over 20, probably over 30 years ago, or at least 30 years ago. Anyway, back to JLU. So Superman is battling Captain Atom, and basically Superman prevails in the fight, but then the scientists or the medics from Cadmus come and try to take care of Captain Atom, and Superman gets angry at them. He's like, no, you don't touch him. He's Justice League. And then he takes Captain Atom with him back to the Watchtower. And in the meanwhile, the Question and with a lot of help from the Huntress, because he's really badly injured after being tortured by the scientists at Project Cadmus, they have already escaped to the Watchtower. And once Superman gets back to the Watchtower, the Question explains to him what he was up to and why he was doing what he was trying to do, as crazy as that sounds. And the whole situation makes Superman very angry. And he wants to, he doesn't think about these things. He just wants to go straight to the problem and deal with it. He thinks, I don't know what he thinks exactly, but he thinks that that's the solution. I think that's clear, that he thinks that, or at least that's what he wants to do. I don't know if he thinks that's really the solution, if he's thought it through that far. But he thinks that that's the way they need to go. And he's talking to, let me see if I can remember everybody's talking. He's certainly talking to Green Arrow, and he's talking to Martian Manhunter, and he's talking to the Flash, and I believe there was somebody else there that he was talking to, but I can't recall exactly. But what Green Arrow does, Superman's talking about all this as if it's all so straightforward, and what Green Arrow does, he steps forward and he says, look, I'm the only guy here who doesn't have any superpowers. And I'm telling you, because Superman can't seem to grasp why Project Cadmus sees the League as a threat. And so Green Arrow kind of gives him the human perspective, the perspective of somebody who doesn't have superpowers, that, you guys are all so big and strong. I can see why they're so scared of you guys and why they're scared of us. It makes sense. And let's see, what happens next? Yes. So while this conversation is going on, Lex Luthor is up to no good. He is hacking into the Justice League satellite, and takes over their binary fusion generator, which is that weapon that they've used a couple times before. It's probably one of the biggest things that gives the government concern over the Justice League, because it's basically I don't know if it's a nuclear weapon or binary fusion generator. I'm not sure exactly what that means. But what he does is he takes over the satellite. Lex Luthor does is he takes over the satellite and fires this at a city in the United States and wipes out this building. Well, the building is deserted, but it looks like the Justice League did this. And so basically he's framing the Justice League. The only other things that happen in this episode, which is called Flashpoint, so then the League tries to go and goes down and tries to help out, but the only things that happen, where this episode ends is you finally see the return of Galatea, who is this clone of Supergirl, who, if you've read the comic books, looks a lot like Power Girl. And she is working. It's the return of Galatea. It's also the return of the Ultimen, who were last seen in the episode Ultimatum, which was in the first season. And basically, the Lex Luthor, along with Amanda Waller, have decided it's time to take out the League, and that's what's going to happen in the next episode in Panic in the Sky, which I'll get into in a moment. But there was a couple other things I want to mention about. A couple other things I want to mention about this episode, and those are it has to do with the music. I thought there were some really nice moments with the music, the way how the music really helped to set the mood. There was the scene where Superman was carrying off Captain Atom early in the episode. I thought it was very moving, and there was also a moment when the JLU arrive on the scene after the binary fusion generator has caused all kinds of damage, because it didn't just wipe out this building, which it turns out was an old headquarters for Cadmus, although nobody was there at the time, but it also sends shockwaves throughout the city, and so there's all kinds of damage, and you don't see anybody get killed. I'm sure in reality, if this happened for real, somebody would get killed, but that doesn't happen. But it does wreak all kinds of damage, and at first people are thankful to the Justice League until somebody steps forward and says, well, what I heard was it was you guys were the ones that did this. You shot us from the sky, and all of a sudden everything changes. So that's definitely a good moment, and you get another one of those tension-filled moments where it's the Justice League versus the rest of the world kind of, where it's the whole, who are they? What are they doing? Do we really trust these people who have all this power, who aren't responsible to anybody other than themselves? So that's the end of Flashpoint. Now, Panic in the Sky is the next episode. And the previous episode ended with Galatea and the Ultimen getting ready to attack the Justice League. And it's not just the first time the Ultimen showed up, there was just 5 of them. But what you've got to know is that the Ultimen are clones. And so they've got like 20 sets of the Ultimen, at least 20 sets. And they are... And so Galatea is given this device which allows her to control the Ultimen. And so they're basically mindless, unlike they were in their previous appearance. And in this episode, you get a lot of really great one-on-one moments. But the big action of this episode is the Ultimen, Galatea and the Ultimen attacking the Watchtower. And then you get this huge battle. But I want to talk about some of these one-on-one moments. You get a great moment at the beginning between Galatea and Professor Hamilton, where she says goodbye to him in a way that makes it sound like she doesn't think she's coming back. I mean, I don't know. That was just the impression I got. And maybe from what you see later in the episode, that's understandable. But... she says, "Goodbye, Daddy." And it's this really moving moment where, and you can see it on his face, too. He wasn't expecting that at all, And so Galatea and the Ultimen attack, but, I guess there's something I should explain before that. Before they attack the League... or the original members of the League, Superman, 5 of the original 7, Superman, Wonder Woman, Martian Manhunter, Superman, Wonder Woman, Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern, and Hawkgirl meet and decide that and this is Superman's suggestion, but they decide that the best thing for them to do is to turn themselves into the Authority until everything's been cleared up over this whole incident where the binary fusion generator fired at an American city. So then you get this great moment where they contact the Flash and they contact Batman to let them know about this and tell them to meet them, where they're going to turn themselves in. And Batman just flips out, He's like, what? What? You got to be nuts, And it's this great moment where, if he says something like, if you're feeling guilty, fine, but, and I'm not going to do this. This is stupid, And then there's this great moment, like 30 seconds later, where where they show up to turn themselves in, and the guy who's in charge, I'm not sure who that's supposed to be. They don't name him. He's some old guy who looks kind of like General Ross from Marvel Comics, from The Incredible Hulk. But I'm not sure who he's supposed to be, or if he is supposed to be anybody in particular. But I don't think he's a character who had shown up before in JLU. But he asks, where's Batman? And the Flash says something about the Batmobile losing a wheel. It's a great line. And he does it so deadpan, So the rest of the members of the JLU are still on the satellite, and at about the same time that the original, 6 of the original 7 are turning themselves in, the people who are on the satellite, because, what I didn't explain before is that when the binary fusion generator was taken over by Lex Luthor, when he took over the binary fusion generator, it wiped out everything went down. All the systems went down and so they have very little power. All they have is some auxiliary power and life support. They don't have they don't have communications. They can't monitor anything. At one point, they're finally able to get television stations up, but they don't have no scanners, no sensors, nothing like that. And so they're trying to get this all up. And you get a nice moment between Steel and Supergirl, And Steele plays a significant role in this episode, and his lines are done by Phil Lamar, who also does the lines for, although it's not in the credits, I could tell by listening to it, but his lines, Phil Lamar plays the role of Steele, and so you get some good conversations there between Steele and Supergirl about, how things are going, and because Supergirl's worried about a lot of stuff, and Steele's like, no, you shouldn't worry about this. He's talking about the original 7, about how they're the best, and it's a little moving there. It's kind of uplifting. Then you get a nice scene between Batman and Amanda Waller, where he questions her trust in Luthor, and she basically flips it around him and says, I don't trust him. I only trust him as far as I can throw him, or something like that. I know that he's dangerous, but Batman kind of plants this seed of doubt, or kind of pushes her a little bit to go and investigate these doubts she has. Now, at the same time, you get this huge fight in between Galatea and the Ultimen and all the League members who are on the satellite. So you get a lot of great scenes, not many lines, but you get a lot of great scenes between fights, so you get a lot of shots, views at heroes who don't show up very often. And, these I don't know if they're really auxiliary members since they're up on the satellite, but they're not part of the original 7. A lot of them haven't had haven't had the focus or the spotlight very much, so some of them have. You get people like Red Tornado, Atom Smasher, you get some of the Justice League Detroit members, and let's see, who else? Of course, I mentioned Steel before. You get Stargirl, I believe, is up there, and you get this great fight scene between them. Now, how do the Galatea and the Ultimen get to the Watchtower? Well, they get to the Watchtower in these missiles, I guess these rockets, and they're in the rockets, and the rockets kind of are launched at the Watchtower, and they bore into the Watchtower, and then they open up, and the Ultimen and Galatea come out. And and at one point, Steele says something about he spots 24 of these Damocles-class missiles coming at them. I'm not sure if Damocles-class missiles are something real or not, but there's 24 of them. It looks like there's one team that comes out of each, so if there's one team of 5 out of each, that would be, over 100 Ultimen. And so you get some scenes where 2 or 3 of the same Ultimen are teaming up against 2 or 3 of the Leaguers, and so you get some really neat fights there. And if you remember, the Ultimen basically have some of the powers that some of those extra members of the Super Friends had back in the 70s. Like you've got a guy who has wind powers, you have another one who has electrical powers, you have another one who grows real big. Let's see, what am I forgetting? Oh yeah, and then you have the twins who one turns into water-based things and the other turns into animals, kind of like the Wonder Twins. So basically, this huge battle goes on. It all comes down to this fight between Supergirl and Galatea. There's this great moment before the fight where Supergirl is running along the corridor towards the reactor room, where I'm not sure if she knows that Steel is battling Power Girl, Galatea in the reactor room. But she's almost there, and then she spots the Atom, and he's unconscious. He's lying on the ground, and she picks him up. And she's like, "Oh, Ray," and then she just puts him right back down on the ground. She doesn't even put him somewhere where he would be safe. She just leaves him somewhere where he could get stepped on. And I thought that was such a funny moment. I don't know if there was any significance to that, or if it was a joke or an inside joke for the artists or what. But I thought it was kind of weird. So all-out action on the Watchtower, lots of cameo appearances. You get this great scene between, confrontation between Supergirl and Galatea. There's a certain amount of smack talking between them. And then towards the end of this fight, Amanda Waller tries to contacts Galatea and tells her to cancel the mission, and Galatea is too hyped up on this, and I'm sorry, I can't hear you, and she destroys the radio that she's got, and goes on fighting Supergirl. Or that might have been before she stepped in to fight Supergirl. Maybe it was when she was fighting Steel, when Galatea was fighting Steel. And then the episode ends with this confrontation between Luthor and Batman. First Waller confronts Luthor, and then first Batman confronts Luthor, that's right, and Luthor throws him out a window, but the League arrives on the scene. They don't really explain when they left government custody. Although, actually, yes, they do. Because then Amanda Waller shows up, and she's there to arrest Luthor. And Luthor was getting ready to transfer his mind into this android, and she destroys the android. And then you get this hideous transformation as it's revealed that Brainiac has been inside Luthor all this time, and apparently this dates back to an episode of Superman the animated series, I believe called Ghost in the Machine, which I've probably seen, but I don't recall watching. But it now makes me want to go back and watch that. That they kind of picked up on one little thing in there, and they said that's when Brainiac inserted himself, a nano version of himself or something, into Luthor's bloodstream, and he's been in there all this time. If you try and think about this stuff a little too much, it's not going to make sense. But it's really kind of grotesque how all these things start coming out of Luthor's back, and then his stomach opens up, and you see Brainiac's face there, and it's really cool, though. So the last episode in this 4-parter is called Divided We Fall. And basically, this episode consists of 2 big battles. And the first battle is Luthor and Brainiac versus the Justice League, of course. And there's like tentacles going everywhere. It's like, once again, don't think about it too much. Just enjoy it. Tentacles are going everywhere. He's kind of got everybody in the league. Well, all 7 members, because that's who he's fighting. Because everybody else is trapped topside on the watchtower, or they're helping out with that rescue effort back in wherever it was that Cadmus building was that the binary fusion generator wiped down. So he almost beats them, but then Martian Manhunter finally wakes up and realizes that he can phase through things, and for some reason he's able to affect Luthor Brainiac in some way, and Luthor takes off, but then you see Brainiac's ship emerge from the LexCorp building, which is where the fight began. And you see the whole building falls apart, and Brainiac's huge ship, the one with the tentacles, that skull face, comes out of there. And the Justice League managed to take it down fairly easily. But, and then they're like, wait, this is too easy, and it was too easy because basically Luthor Brainiac basically used it as a ruse to escape. And he's gone down into the sewers, and he goes to Project Cadmus and gets his hands on the Darkheart technology, which goes back to another episode from season 1 of JLU. And this is why you've got to watch you don't have to watch every single episode, but you really should watch all of the Project Cadmus related episodes, because they pull all of these different things together, and they do it so beautifully. So Brainiac Luthor, or Luthor Brainiac, gets his hands on the Darkheart technology, and he makes this ultimate suit of armor for himself. And there's this great conversation between Luthor and Brainiac, where Brainiac's like, well, I'm just going to absorb you. And Luthor's like, well, but then what are you going to do? And he's like, well, then I'll absorb everything on Earth. And he's like, well, then what are you going to do? He says, well, then I'll just absorb everything in the universe. He said, well, then what are you going to do? He's like, no, I can give you a better purpose in life, And so you've got this interesting conversation between Luthor and Brainiac that goes on here. And what he says is what he can contribute to this is imagination. And so then you get the second battle between Luthor, Brainiac, and the League, the original 7. And at first, what he does is he creates, the Brainiac side of him creates all these versions of himself, of Brainiac, to fight them. And Luthor's like, no, that's too easy, or that's what a lack of imagination, or something like that. And then he changes them all into the Justice Lords, these robots. And so then the League fight the Justice Lords, which is really cool, including a Justice Lord version of The Flash, which you never got to see in A Better World, which was that episode of Justice League from season 2 of Justice League. And they defeat the Justice Lords, but they don't defeat Brainiac initially. And at first, all of them are going down, and then the only one left is the Flash, and then the Flash takes off running. And this was the thing that blew me away the first time I saw it. I never expected the Flash to be the one to save the day in the end, to be the one to bring everything together. And there's this great moment. Well, it's just great. It's a Flash takes off, and he's running around the world, and he starts hitting, and he goes so fast that he winds getting sucked into the Speed Force. Now, I should say, I have read a little bit of Flash's comics, but I'm aware of the Speed Force, but I really don't know that much about it. So anyway, he gets sucked into the Speed Force. I don't know, I really don't know much about the Speed Force. I suppose that's something I could look up, but I'm sure it's been used in different ways, so I guess that's kind of a dismissive way of saying I'm not going to look into it, but basically he saves them, but then he has to be saved by them because he's in the Speed Force and he doesn't want to leave. It's like it's warped his perception of reality, and they manage to pull him out of the Speed Force. Not sure exactly how, but other than physically pulling him, but they pull him out of the Speed Force. And that's kind of a moving moment because it's kind of like it's so bright here. It's so beautiful. I don't think I want to come back. And so all of them kind of link together and pull him out. And then the final scene in this is a scene in a park somewhere where the original 7 are saying about how they're going to step down and they're going to disband the League. And then you get this great moment where Green Arrow steps forward again and says, hey, wait a minute, don't be so high-handed, or something like that, And basically to provide the counterpoint to Superman's statements, because Superman's the one who is speaking for the League. And then you get a nice little exchange between Batman and Green Arrow where Batman says something about, he says something in Latin which translates to who guards the Guardians, which is which kind of course makes me think of who watches the Watchmen, and I think it has to be a reference to that, but I mean, not that this story is in any way exactly like that. I think it's got some themes in common. I think that this whole idea of power and power unchecked and the responsibility of those in power to those who have voted them into power and who are protected by them. And so it's a great moment. And it's really cool seeing Green Arrow being the one having this voice of the people or this voice of the common man, this voice, somebody who steps forward, who says, who speaks something, truth to power. I don't know. It's one of those expressions I'm not crazy about. But the only other thing I can think of to say about this episode is during this battle or these two battles between Brainiac, Luthor, and the League, you don't see any sign of anybody. There's buildings getting knocked over. There's, where were the civilians doing this? There's huge amounts you don't even see people running from this, I didn't expect to see people getting killed left and right, even though that would have been realistic. But it's almost as if they're battling this in an empty city, So that's the end of that 4-parter, which was really, really cool and lots of fun. And I should have watched it. I should have done an episode on all 4 episodes together, but I'd already covered the first part in the previous episode when I talked about Justice League Unlimited. So I was just going to talk about those 3. And I actually did go back and watch all 4 together in a row after I'd made my notes and while I was getting my notes together, really, and I picked up on a few things here and there that I hadn't noticed before. And so there's one more episode in this run, and that's called Epilogue, and it has very little to do with Project Cadmus. It certainly is not any part of the end of the story, of the end of the Cadmus story, which really ended with the previous episode, Divided We Fall. But Epilogue is kind of... See, at this point, they weren't sure if there was going to be a Season 3 of JLU. And so they made this as kind of a capstone to all of the DC animated universe stuff. So you've got... So it for the most part, this episode takes place in the future. In a way, it's really a Batman Beyond episode. And you also get kind of 3 stories in this one episode, or 3 perspectives. And the episode opens with Terry McGinnis, who is the Batman of the future, the Batman in Batman Beyond, breaking into Amanda Waller's mansion. And they say this takes place 65 years in the future. That's what the little words on the screen say at the beginning of the episode. You get flashbacks in this. So the main story is this confrontation between Terry McGinnis and Amanda Waller, but then you get flashbacks by both of them. Now the flashbacks of Terry's take place, just in the last few days, and those are all in widescreen, extra widescreen, I would say, and they're also in black and white for some reason. And then you get Amanda Waller's flashbacks, which are all in color, and they're all full screen. Interesting. Not 100% clear on why. I mean, other than to differentiate them, it's not entirely clear as to why they did that. There is a reference in this to the Return of the Joker, the Batman Beyond Return of the Joker movie, which I talked about back on episode 16 or 17, something like that, which is really the best that Batman Beyond got. But not that there weren't some other good episodes, but that was just head and shoulders above the rest. So the reason why Terry has broken into, and he doesn't break in as dressed as Batman. He breaks in dressed as himself, in his civilian identity. But the reason why he breaks in is he wants information from Amanda Waller about himself. Because basically what he's found out is that he is Bruce Wayne's son. But he doesn't know exactly. At first, he's not sure if he's his son. And the reason why he found this out was because Bruce Wayne had, I want to say it was kidney failure, and they needed to clone a kidney from somebody, and he turned out to be a perfect match. And the odds of that, well, they say something like 99 to 1 or 113 to 1 or something like that. And I'm thinking it's got to be even bigger than that 2 people who know each other but aren't related would be that close a match. I could be wrong. I don't work in the medical profession. I don't know anything about this. I don't have any experience with this. So I don't know. But so he wants information from Amanda Waller. So you get his flashback scenes, you get his confrontations with Bruce, who's older. And I guess I should explain this. This takes place, I think this is supposed to be like 10 years, maybe even 15 years after the last episode of Batman Beyond. So this is, and I'm not sure where that would put it in comparison to the Batman Beyond movie, because I can't recall if that takes place a while after the TV series or not. I'm not sure. But you get these stories. You get his story. You see him breaking up with his girlfriend, Dana. I think it's Dana. And then you get Amanda Waller's stories, which is her. She talks about this episode where the League was fighting the Royal Flush Gang, and it's this different incarnation of the Royal Flush Gang. She refers to it as the second or maybe the third incarnation of the Royal Flush Gang. And the Leaguers that are there are Batman, Hawkgirl, Red Tornado, Stargirl, and Dr. Light. And they're facing off against the Royal Flush Gang. And the problem is that the leader of the Royal Flush Gang, Ace, who is a young girl, is extremely powerful. She has the ability to warp reality, and she's dying. She's got something wrong with her brain. She's going to have an aneurysm or something like that. And Amanda Waller is concerned that, and this is take place, like maybe 5 years after the events of the previous episode, the Cadmus episode. So this is not way this is not in the recent past at all. And so basically Batman agrees to go in, and Amanda Waller gives him this device to kill Ace, who's this young girl. And he talks about, or she talks about, the experiments that Project Cadmus did on her, and she can read minds, and she knows that he's not going to try and kill her. And he just basically goes in there to stay with her until she dies, And then everything kind of returns to normal, because prior to that, which I didn't explain, is that she had changed everything. So like the middle of, I don't know if this was Central Park or in New York City or where this was supposed to be, but this park, there was, this castle there now, and all this stuff was stuff that had been created by her. And basically this whole story is Amanda Waller's way of telling Terry that Batman, well, there's two things she's trying to get across, and that Batman is a much better person than he thinks he is, than Terry thinks Bruce is. And the other point that she's trying to make is that the world needs Batman. And she foresees a point when Bruce won't be able to be Batman anymore. And so she reveals that it wasn't Bruce who is responsible for the fact that Terry is his son. She's the one who's responsible, that she took some of his DNA from some time when he was injured and then injected the person who he thought was his father with this thing which took over his DNA. So when his father impregnated his mother, it wasn't his DNA but Bruce's DNA that was active, or that was in him. And so I mean that's a large part of the story. And basically in the end you have this reconciliation between between Bruce and Terry. There's a mention of the gray ghost in here. You also see from the other Batman movie, the Mask of the Phantasm. Phantasm shows up in this briefly. So there's a lot of good stuff in this episode. And there's also this great moment where Amanda Waller and Terry are talking, and she has offered him a cup of tea. This is much earlier in the episode. She's offered him a cup of tea, and he's angry. He doesn't have time for that. He slaps it out of her hand, and it breaks. And she's picking it up, and she's talking about the broken china, and Terry is talking about being Batman, and they're kind of, both talking at the same time. So you get one line from one, then you get one line from the other, and it's kind of like they're both talking about the same thing, but they aren't talking about the same thing. And it's this great moment, very rarely will happen. I mean, I think it's rare that you get a good moment like this in a lot of things, but to have something like this in a Justice League episode or a JLU episode is just great. And if this had been the end of Justice League and the end of the DC animated universe, it would have been a beautiful end. It's not the end. There is, of course, going to be more. There are 13 more episodes of JLU, and I'm going to get to those at some point in the not-too-distant future, although I want to get back to Young Justice Season 1. I'm still waiting for them to put Season 2 on Netflix. I am also probably going to go back and do an episode on a few episodes of JLU that I did not talk about before, which are all... Well, they're all good episodes. They're all very good episodes, good to great, and they're all episodes that I should have done an episode on, and that will probably be my next JLU episode before I get back to Young Justice. And I'll explain then why I picked those episodes. I mean, they're all good ones, and they're probably the three best of the ones that I have not talked about so far. And they're all important too. So that's it. That's it for now. For Season 2. That's the wrap-up of Season 2 of Justice League Unlimited. There is... Like I said, I'm going to do one more episode, which going back to Season 1 of JLU. That's my plan. And that will probably be in another 4 to 6 weeks, I would guess. Something like that. And so next up, I'm going to be talking about, on my next animation-focused episode, or my next DC animation-focused episode, I'll probably be talking JLU, and then after that, probably Young Justice. And I'm going to try and do more episodes on Young Justice than I did in the past. So that's it for Justice League Unlimited episodes, Season 2, episodes 10 through 13. Just wanted to say a word about Young Justice and JLU and Justice League and Netflix. In late March of 2015, those three shows were taken off of Netflix, and I thought the move was permanent, and I started to think that it had something to do with the fact that Netflix had a deal with Marvel. After all, the Daredevil show came out about a week or two later on Netflix, so I suspected, and I'm sure other people may have come to the same conclusion, that there was some conspiracy theory there, or no, I guess conspiracy theory isn't the right word, but there was something that the Marvel deal had something to do with the DC shows being pulled. But I just noticed the other day, now this is mid to late April of 2015, less than a month later, that the shows are back. Justice League is back, Justice League Unlimited is back, Young Justice is back, although still only Season 1. Now, in the meanwhile, I actually went out and bought the DVDs for all three of these shows. So I own them all on DVD now, and there are some nice DVD extras. I haven't watched them all yet since I bought them, but there are some nice extras, and I plan on going through those. And, of course, I also bought Young Justice Season 2, which is not available on Netflix. So that's really cool. Yeah. I'm not sure where I'm going with this. But I guess the point is, I don't know what is up with Netflix. I've done some Google searches, and I can't find anything. They're not making any announcements about what's going on. So I don't know what's what. All I know is that these shows, at least at the time that I'm recording this, in late April, mid to late April 2015, those shows are available on Netflix once again. How long they'll be up there, I have no idea. That's it for episode 70 of Dave Talks Comics. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com and facebook.com/DaveTalksComics. On Twitter, at Dave Talks Comics. Email can be sent to davetalkscomics@gmail.com. If you're curious about what I've been reading, I've been tweeting and posting on Facebook pictures of the stuff I've been reading. Not a lot, just like a picture or two a day. So if you check out my Twitter feed, Dave Talks Comics, or Facebook, that's facebook.com/DaveTalksComics, you'll see one or two images pop up, not every day, but I play about 5 or 6 images a week of things I've been reading. Sometimes cover images, sometimes I take pictures of interior pages and post those. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.
You want me to what?
Turn yourself over into U.S. custody, along with the rest of us.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Meet us at the coordinates I'm sending first. We should all go over together.
This is the single dumbest plan I've ever heard. If you're feeling guilty, clear your own name. Don't stand on the sidelines waiting for somebody else to do it.
We've already voted. 5 in favor.
6.
You have to come with us, Bruce.
I don't have to do anything. I'm a part-timer, remember?
Actually, he took it a lot better than I'd expected.